Official histories note that rugby was played at an informal level around Waikaia by run holders and gold miners from the 1870s, just 40 years after the game had been invented in Britain. The game was played for fun, fitness, and a chance to socialise and meet up with mates. After playing amongst themselves for nearly 20 years, in July 1892 the club was officially formed. Up until 1908, the club played in the Eastern Southland competition. Matches were usually sporadic, with travel being the main issue. Horse and cart would usually transport the team as far as the stations at Riversdale or Balfour, then rail them to the location. As today, the club drew players from right around a wide-spanning district. This became easier in 1908 when Waikaia was requested to join the Northern Sub-Union and opposition teams were much closer. By 1909, the railway had reached Waikaia, which enabled better accessibility for the club. There are records of the train often running late and the team being forced to change into their gear in the rail car en route to the match. One of the earliest reports of a match that Waikaia played in comes from May 1897, where on a Wednesday afternoon, Waikaia defeated Riversdale 6-0. The match report noted that the game was called off early due to an onset of a vicious snowstorm. In the early 1890s, the population of the Waikaia district had been in serious decline due to dwindling gold returns and the economic recession of the 1880s that had seriously affected the high country sheep stations. But the district's fortunes were reversed with the introduction of gold dredging, which boomed around Waikaia and Wendonside until the 1920s. For around 15 years, two senior teams played out of the club. Waikaia, which was made up of the men from the village and the upper valley, and they wore a red, white and navy hoop strip, and the Waikaia Pirates, which was made up of players from the Freshford Wendonside area and wore a green strip. Nicknamed the Cookshop Boys, the Waikaia Pirates team was usually made up of dredging workers and were at one time termed a rough but jolly assemblage of lads. The two teams finally combined in 1912, and today little evidence of the Pirates' existence remains, other than in folklore, and the remnant team banner, which is usually housed in the Switzers Museum. After the teams combined, the club adopted the well-known sky blue strip that it continues to wear today. World War I and the influenza epidemic hit Northern Southland hard. A large cohort of club members served New Zealand in the First World War, with several sadly not returning. Incredibly, the club emerged in the 1920s as one of the strongest in Southland. Much of the club's early history around this period is unknown due to the loss of all of the early records in the Great Fire of Inverlochy Homestead. One story that survives from the 1920s evolves around the Waikaia bus arriving late at Riversdale following several punctures along the way. Riversdale had started the match unopposed and had already scored a try. The official histories note that an argument ensued upon the arrival of Waikaia, and the match was subsequently called off. Following the First World War, clubs from Northern began to compete for the Bedford-Compton Shield. The 1920s were famous for a major milestone for Waikaia. The club won the Bedford-Compton Shield for the first time. A strong Waikaia team emerged to win the Shield in 1922 and 1923. In a rivalry that was to last until the 1990s, the team narrowly lost the Shield to Lumsden in 1924 and 1925. Suspiciously, there are few records of practice or training nights during this period. The club managed to win the B grade and Sevens titles, but it was not until 1949 that the Bedford-Compton returned to Waikaia. The team was led by player coach Stan Ramsey, the local grocer who had been a prisoner of war for 4 years in Germany during World War II. The 49ers had become legendary in club folklore. Several members of the team later coached the club, and 3 members were later awarded life membership. 19-year-old first 5'8" John Hotop was a crucial part of this team. He would later be selected for 5 different provincial unions and played 3 tests for the All Blacks during the 1950s. After the Second World War, there was a boom in junior rugby across Southland. Waikaia was no exception, and during various seasons the club sported B grade, junior and senior teams in the open grade. In 1952, Bill McKee was selected for Southland and was part of the team that convincingly defeated the touring Australian team 24-9 at Rugby Park in Invercargill. 4 days later, the same Australian team beat the All Blacks. In 1950, a young agricultural cadet named Wilson Winneray played this season for the Waikaia senior team. Sir Wilson would go on to be the longest serving captain of the All Blacks until he was surpassed by Richie McCaw in 2014. At senior level, the club went through a 29-year stretch without winning the Bedford Compton. The exception to this was the powerful team of 1962.
When he came into the shower, Hardy Voss being one of our better locks that we had for over the years.
Remember him?
And came washing in the shower that day with his injury. and someone had stood on the old fellow and jumped on it. And the thing came up about the size of my hat.
Yeah.
And he came in the shower and Ron Collins says, Hardy Voss, you're back. And he came waltzing through this many things. It was immense. It was a bloodbath.
The club was honoured to hold a reunion and a 50th anniversary dinner for this team in 2012. Arguably the strongest period for the club and the modern era has been during the 1970s and early 1980s. 2 senior teams competed most seasons and junior teams often topped the grades. Waikaia had a strong influence in the northern representative teams, and several players advanced to play for Southland. The 1970s also saw a women's team develop, which played several games both within the club and against neighbouring teams. The team was revived between 2002 and 2004 to be one of only 4 clubs in Southland with a female team in the open grade. Several women represented Southland out of the Waikaia club between 2002 and 2004. Out of the 1978 team came one of the club's finest moments when number 8, Ashley McGregor, was selected for the All Blacks Tour of Britain and Ireland. Ash captained Waikaia to back-to-back Bedford Compton victories in 1978 and 1979, the first time the club had gone 2 in a row since the 1920s. Several club members went on to represent Southland during this powerful era. The last match of the 1984 season was played at the Waikaia Domain between a highly fancied Riversdale team and a hot and cold Waikaia outfit. The winner would hold the Bedford Compton for the summer. The victory of 1984 remains Waikaia's last major victory in the senior competition. The end of the 1980s saw a change around New Zealand. Player numbers began to drop off. Southland had too many clubs and not enough players for them all to field senior teams. These years were a struggle for Waikaia, as brief alliances with Riversdale and Balfour were sought to ensure rugby was still available at a senior level. Initially, the Northern competition combined briefly with Eastern before the Southland-wide competition began in the 1990s. A single senior team was the norm, which featured player-dependent form throughout the seasons. The Speight's Trophy was held on a number of occasions, but playing numbers continued to decline across Southland. Getting 15 blokes together for a team became a struggle. The 1999 team infamously had 54 players on its roster. But something had to give. Clubs in the northern area were forced to amalgamate with neighbours in order to provide senior teams for their communities. Waikaia joined with Riversdale, and whilst there were initially some uneasy times at administrative level, from 2001 to the present, the situation has provided different levels of rugby for all players.
We found that we still wanted to keep our club identity, so it was important for us to keep going for the people further up the valley that didn't really want to travel that far to rugby. So we found a niche in that senior C grade that was a wee bit more social, that wasn't so competitive, but still good grade of rugby, and it's thrived, and we've gone on for another 15 years like that, really.
The Waikaia team has varied in grades from Division 2, President's Grade, Premier Development to Division 1B. The team has won its division 4 times over the last decade. Players from the area that wished for a sterner challenge were enabled to play Division 1 rugby for Riversdale. In 2012, Life member Malcolm McKee was one of the initiators of the Eastern Northern Barbarians, a Gore-based team which enabled gifted players from clubs like Waikaia to play Premier Rugby. After several near misses, the Barbarians won the Galbraith Shield for the first time in 2016. 7 players from that championship team whakapapa'd back to the Waikaia club. The Barbarians have also produced Waikaia's most recent Southland representatives, with Scott McKee in 2012 and Michael McKee in 2015. A feature of any club is the progression of its members, from junior rugby to senior to administrator. The Waikaia club has seen this through the ages and is indebted to such individuals. Like any club, today's players are tomorrow's administrators. Off the field, the Waikaia club has proved an important communal hub for the surrounding community. The social nature remains legendary, and junior numbers have strengthened across the decades.
The one thing I couldn't get over about Waikaia when I first came here, that you jumped on a bus and there was families on the bus as well. There was kids, there was mums and dads, and that we wouldn't be getting home to midnight, but everybody looked after everybody else, had a great time. Club rooms are always a family. It was a real family club, which I found pretty unique, really, in rugby.
This remains a club here to serve the community. A club where the president is still required to lace up the boots and occasionally burgle the odd try. A club where members of the community feel as much as a part of it as the players who threaten to turn up to training. The tireless efforts of those off the field have today ensured there remains different levels of rugby available from schoolboy through to Premier for the Waikaia district. Into its 13th decade of existence, the Waikaia club continues to offer competitive and enjoyable sport for locals, just as it did to the handful of gold miners, farmers and school teachers of 1892.